Yeah, I want you to start you discussing right away. Decide. What do you think now, before we even have the lesson? Is the Bible and science, are they adversaries, allies, or apathetic? Drew's not here. I did the alliteration for him because I know he he likes alliterations. But yeah, talk about it. Yeah, with the group at your table. Believe it or not, the Bible tells us what the answer to that question is. Romans 1:20, for ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. And then Psalm 19:1, the heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without sound or word. Their voice is never heard, yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. So that's just two verses. There are other verses that are similar to this, and then the Romans one, that's sort of like my theme verse as a science person and Christian, is that people can see God through what has been made. So nature and the Bible agree with each other. What do we call the study of nature? That's science. So science and the Bible agree. Theologians often use the phrase, the two books of Revelation. There's special revelation, which is Scripture, and general revelation, which is nature. If there are two books and God wrote both of them, they have to agree with each other. So whether you want to call them a book of Revelation or not, I think that's kind of irrelevant. God made Scripture and God made the earth. You want to call them a book? I don't care. But he did both. They have to agree. So if they appear not to agree, then either we have misinterpreted the science, we have misinterpreted Scripture, or maybe we've even misinterpreted both. Some people don't like all of those choices. There are some people who would say only choice number one is okay. That Scripture says what it says, and if it appears to disagree with science, then somebody messed up their science. I am not uncomfortable with any of those choices. I think we can always learn more about Scripture. But that leads to that leads to a question, a pretty obvious question. Is it ever okay to allow science to affect how we interpret the Bible? That makes some people a little uncomfortable on first glance. Like, ooh, no, the Bible, we can let science affect how we interpret the Bible. And other people are like, yeah, it's okay. So, next discussion question, this one. At your tables, decide, is it ever okay to allow science to change how you interpret the Bible? Okay, well, again, it sounds like there is still good discussion going on. You haven't started talking about your medical issues yet, but I'm going to go on. I know that oftentimes when this issue of science in the Bible, or is it ever okay to let the Bible or let science help us interpret the Bible, the thing that comes to everybody's mind immediately is, evolution or the age of the earth, those kinds of things. We're not going to do that today. We're going to address this question, is it ever okay to let science affect how we interpret the Bible, by looking at some passages that I hope at least are not controversial. And unless you, don't think that the church has pulled some kind of bait and switch, we will talk about evolution and the age of the earth, just not the first night. Yeah. Okay. We'll get there. You just have to come back. Yeah. So let's read John 11:39 through 44. This is at Lazarus' tomb when Jesus got there after he had died, and Mary and Martha are upset that Jesus didn't come. So, roll the stone aside, Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, "Lord, he has been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible." Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, "Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out!" And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and go." Okay, well, what I want us to do is to take this passage and let's answer 4 questions about it. What physical event is being described? What's the theological meaning? Is it compatible with ancient people's understanding of science, and is it compatible with our understanding of science? We'll do that one at a time. So, first, what's the physical event? Well, Lazarus came back from the dead. And what's the theological message that we're supposed to get out of this? Well, Jesus has power over death. Is the physical event, Lazarus coming back, is that described in a way that ancient scientists would have said, yeah, that's how it happens? No, they knew dead people didn't normally just come back, even if somebody yelled at them to do so. And and we've had 2,000 years since then to study such things. What do we think now? Do people just come back when you yell at them? No. Yeah. So, in this case, no, we're not going to allow modern science to change how we interpret this passage. Jesus has power over death. That's the whole point of the passage. If we said, well, science proves that that's ridiculous. People don't do that. It's obviously false. And then, we're not going to allow science to affect how we interpret this. Okay. Well, with those same questions, I'm going to put you to work now on some other verses, and I'm going to distribute them out. Each table can have their own verse. Before we do that, since one of the questions is, how well, is it consistent with ancient people's understanding of science? And you're like, well, I don't know what they thought then. We know that, of course, they didn't understand electricity or astronomy or lots of things that we know about now. But these are 2 ancient pictures of the earth. The one on the left is Egypt, and the one on the right is from the Babylonian area. And in both cases, you see that they thought that, well, at least the Egyptians thought that the different parts of the cosmos were gods themselves, like the sky was a god, and the earth was a god, and the water was a god, sun was a god. And in both cases, they thought that there were waters above, that's why the sky was blue, and waters below. That's why there were such things as wells, you could find water in. And the thing that separated the waters above from the waters below, what they called the firmament. It's this solid thing up there that kept the water from coming through. All right, so that's the ancient picture of the world that we'll go with. And there are the 4 questions listed that I'd like you to talk about at your table. And then I will just assign these. So let's go with, well, you all can do the first one. John 2, 1 through 12. Exodus, the Exodus one. You all do Psalm, Job 38, Psalm 135, 7. I want to clarify something. I showed you that picture of what the ancient Near Eastern people's view of the world, physical world was. But when I ask you how would ancient people view the physical event being described in the Bible, I'm talking about the Hebrews. That was not clear at all. Since I showed you those pictures for the Egyptians and the Babylonians, maybe you would interpret that question to mean what would ancient people in general think. but I mean ancient Hebrew. So if you're trying to, like, you don't have to think about multiple gods, for example. But the physical picture that the Hebrews would have had of the world would have been similar to the Egyptian and the Babylonian picture, the physical picture. Okay, I think most groups have finished. If you haven't, that's fine. But let's go ahead and move forward. Well, is there any table that is willing to share what your passage was and what you concluded? You will? Okay, here, I'll give you the microphone. Read the scripture and then answer and then tell what the answer to.
We had Ecclesiastes and then the Psalms. I have the Psalms one pulled up. Let's start with Ecclesiastes. Generations.
The highlighted part.
Okay, the sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. Or in Psalm 19, it says, God has made a home in the heavens for the sun. It bursts forth like a radiant bridegroom after his wedding. It rejoices like a great athlete eager to run the race. The sun rises at one end of the heavens and follows its course to the other end. Nothing can hide from its heat. So the physical event is the sun rising and setting. The theological message, and especially if you read the surrounding verses, is that God made this. And he's the one that, created the sun and the earth. The physical event, the way it's described, it makes it sound like the sun is the one that is the thing that's moving and the earth is stationary. So that is different from the way we understand it now, modern, where we know that the earth is spinning and as far as we can tell, the sun is stationary. But it's... Go ahead. No, I said for number 3, the ancient understanding, that's what they would understand, that the earth is stationary and the sun is moving around. The interesting thing is that we still talk about it that way. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So any other table would... Nobody wants the mic? Well, I think the mic is mostly for the live stream. Okay. Yeah, the mic is mostly for the live stream.
Thank you. We had Psalms 139, verse 13. My Bible says, "It's certainly you made my mind and heart. You wove me together in my mother's womb." We think the physical event is, it's gestation. And the theological message is that God is the creator of life. We also believe that it's consistent with ancient understanding because they both experienced giving and, creating a child in their womb and giving birth, but also, raising animals themselves and whatnot. So they saw gestation happen before their eyes. We also think it is consistent with modern science just because the way the Bible explains it, there's really nothing like we can't explain or that's supernatural happening. So
that one is a little tricky because I suppose we don't know exactly how ancient people would have understood what was happening when a baby was gestating. Because it uses that word knit. And I'm pretty sure that they didn't actually imagine God in their belly crocheting with the needles, but they may have thought that the process was so miraculous that God had to be intimately involved with the process. I think that he was explicitly directing the process, that it wasn't just natural. So I don't know exactly what they thought. I don't know if anybody knows exactly what they thought, but certainly today we would say the scientists would say, oh, that's a completely natural process. God doesn't have to have anything to do with it. we, as Christians would say, well, no, God's involved. Some of these are sort of like the one that, I did, where clearly this is a miracle. The whole point is that it's a miracle. The ancients would have thought it was a miracle. We think it's a miracle. The whole point is that it's a miracle. There are other examples, like the one with the sun, where what's the point of saying that God makes the sun go? Well, that God made the sun, that he makes it go around and rise and set. Well, the point is that God made that, and that he is in control of even things on that vast of a scale. We understand it scientifically differently than the ancient Hebrews would have, but we still can agree that God made it and that he has authority over it. So I think that most of us can agree that, unless you happen to think that, unless you're still an anti-Copernican, then you can agree that pretty much everyone has allowed science to affect how they interpret the Bible. What we have not done is allow science to affect how we interpret the theological point that the Bible is trying to make. We have allowed science to interpret the physical things that are described in the Bible. The ancient Hebrews would have taken literally a bunch of stuff that we say is allegorical, or a word that is used by experts, people who study this, is accommodation. That God was using accommodation to bring the language of what he was trying to describe down to the level of the people to whom he was trying to describe it. That if he had given the ancient Hebrews a model of the solar system, it wouldn't have made any sense anyway. So, it would say that he was using accommodations for them. But the theological point that his accommodation made is the same as the theological point that we get it out of it when we read it. Even if we think, we understand now that that's not physically how it happens, we still get the same theology out of it. I think that's the take-home message for the day. If you like, I have down there at the bottom, that if you would like to stay at your table and discuss how the lesson changed how you think about science in the Bible, then fine. But I think as far as my part is concerned, I am finished.